Welcome back. This is episode 3 of this series. To recap, in the first episode we saw how the triangular powers won World War II. In the second episode we explored how the world would develop afterwards and how the Cold War would play out, which resulted in the Baltic Treaty Organization winning and becoming the dominant world power. Now we will see how the world continues following the end of the Cold War. Welcome to After the collapse of Spain, France and Italy, the African Union intervened militarily to restore order. The Africans landed at Gibraltar and moved into the countryside. The African intervention only throwed more fuel to the fire, as even more separatists rose up. The Spanish would fight back with everything they had, slowing down the Africans significantly. In Libya, the Africans had a lot more success. The entire west of the country fell to the African Union, and the government had to relocate to the east. The African Union also tried to take Corsica, which ended up becoming a disaster for the AU. All landings failed, and Corsica held on. Then, a huge problem came for the African Union. With 3 of the 4 ML Permanent Security Council members in open rebellion, the Netherlands gained near full control of the organization. The ML quickly recognized all of the breakaway states and accepted their request to join. The Mondial League then opened peace talks. Spain would keep all of their core land, but the separatists would be granted their independence. The AU demanded that Spain became permanently neutral in all conflicts and couldn't join any alliance. Spain had to give its permanent seat in the ML Security Council to Catalonia. Corsica would remain free and western Libya became occupied by the African Union. The old Security Council existed of the Netherlands, Spain, France and the Italian Union, with Rhodesia and Scotland serving as the 2 non-permanent members. Non-permanent members were elected every 6 years. France had a new government but they still existed, so simply retained their seat. Spain had given their seat to Catalonia. For Italy, this wasn't so easy. Some pointed to South Italy as the successor of Italy, as they were the last to leave the Union. Others pointed to Tuscany, as they held the Union capital. Most would point to Savoy, as the Union was their idea. The Mondial League would solve this issue by simply giving the seat to one of the 2 non-permanent members. After a vote, Rhodesia got the seat, and their non-permanent seat was given to Estonia. The African Union was outraged by this. They were at this point the 2nd strongest nation on the planet, yet they were denied the great power status they deserved. In East Asia, all new nations were permitted into the ML without any issues. The only trouble still present in the region were the warlord states of the Kam clique and the Mengjiang clique. As these 2 nations continued to destabilize the region, even after becoming members of the Mondial League. The Southeast Asian archipelago wasn't doing much better. The fall of China sent the region into complete chaos. The already weak democracies failed, and the door for radicalism to spread here was opened. Australia saw 3 new warlord states pop up in the former Chinese territories. Spanish Australia became 5 new countries. New Caledonia, the Solomon Islands, Fiji, and mainland Australia all turned into democracies. New Zealand also became democratic, but under a constitutional monarchy, with the crown given to the sister of the Breton king. After the establishment of NACO, Northern America slowly drifted away from Europe. The Kingdom of North America as leader of NACO had experienced rising tensions with the Dutch Empire over the various regions still occupied around Northern America. In particular, the Mexico Corridor was a very controversial topic. During the Cold War, the Spanish Empire had blocked BTO and Sinosphere usage of the Panama Canal, leading to the Dutch keeping the Mexico Corridor for easy access between the Pacific and Atlantic Oceans. With the Cold War over, and with Colombia forced to allow everyone through the canal, North America argues that the corridor has lost its purpose and that it needs to be returned to North America. The Netherlands have ignored these claims, phrasing them as excuses to expand into Dutch territory. The Netherlands later returned its ports in Rhodesia to the Rhodesian government. The Netherlands offered the same to West Australia, but they refused, as they recognized Dutch Australia as an integral part of the Netherlands, choosing to improve relations with the Netherlands instead. Following their independence, Corsica has struggled to stabilize their country. As one of the smallest countries in the world, and with very little usable land, Corsica has been experimenting with changing the very principles of a modern economy. After many reforms, Corsica became the founding father of modern leftism as the country adopted syndicalism as its ideology. Syndicalism worked well for Corsica, as the country had very little people and was quite poor. Corsica's adoption of a radical ideology opened the door for more countries to take similar approaches, both right and left. Over in Asia, Siberia stood at the top of the continent. It was the leader of the Asian Commonwealth and have influence stretching from the Volga River to the Java Sea. The problem? They have one of the smallest populations on the continent and half of their country is an Arctic wasteland. They have a relatively big industry, as they need it to sustain their position on the continent, and therefore they have a large working class. Of course, Siberia is extremely people-friendly and is one of the best countries to live in. With the rise of leftism in Corsica, many in Siberia are willing to experiment with leftism too. Siberian theorists, however, point out that the syndicalist structure of Corsica is designed for a small society and wouldn't work in Siberia. Therefore, Siberian leftists call for a stronger government, removing the anarchistic part of Corsicanism. Siberian communism becomes very popular with the people, and Siberia declares itself communist. Quickly, communism spreads across the Cyberosphere as Ural, China, Xinjiang, Korea, South China, North Philippines, and Borneo all turn to communism. In the African Union, resentment for the BTO and the Mondial League had surged. Internationally, the country was still known as the United Republics of Africa. The AU's dictator was a smart man. He knew that the African Union needed to remain silent on the world stage as to not make any more enemies than they already had. However, his younger brother did not share the same intelligence. Being fed nationalist propaganda all his life, he believed that the African Union needed to be restored to greatness. On April 18, 2005, he surrounded the presidential palace and murdered his older brother and his cabinet of advisors. The African Union covered this incident as a Guinean separatist plot, and the new leader, the younger brother, vowed revenge for the murder of the old leader. He declared the end of the African Union and the formation of the new Carthaginian Empire. A fascist empire. Soon after, rumors of genocide in Guinea started to spread outside of the country. But internally, all anti-government speech was banned. Niger also joined Carthage and turned to fascism as well. Many crimes were committed under the new regime, and many chose to flee the country. The most popular routes were through the western Mediterranean towards Spain, but the Carthaginian navy patrolled the waters all day long and catched most of the escapers. The other route went through the Strait of Messina, but once caught inside South Italy, the South Italian government would send you back to Carthage, where you would undergo brutal punishments. Finally, the safest route was through the border with Niger, which you could still cross mostly without any issue, and then through the Sahara Desert into Libya. Every year, thousands of people succumb to the extreme Saharan conditions and are never heard of again. But once in Libya proper, you could safely continue on your journey to the north without risk of being sent back. Every day the Libyan government sends patrol groups through the desert to find any refugees to help. After the rise of fascism in Africa, Murcia also flipped to fascism. The country had already been aligned with the AU after the Cold War, and now embraced Carthage's new ideology. Although Murcian fascism was not as radical as Carthaginian fascism, it did join Carthage's new alliance, the Mutual Security Initiative, MSI. The MSI also found new friends on the other sides of the globe. Carthage sponsored a coup in Brazil, who turned to fascism as well. Carthage wanted to reintegrate Brazil into the empire, to make up for the mistake of giving it up all those centuries ago. Brazil moved on Rondônia and Venezuela, annexing both. The Chilean economy collapsed as the country embraced syndicalism. Riots rocked Peru, as many feared Brazilian invasion and called for radical actions. With any resemblance of authority collapsing in Peru, the government requested unification with Chile. On August 2, 2013, the Union of South American Communes was proclaimed. Santa Catarina joined on September 8, 2014. India and Arabia still held their old oligarchic governments that were once set up by China during the Cold War. With a communist threat to their north, they opted to align with the MSI in hopes of destroying the world order. This move shocked India's traditional ally, Afghanistan. Since World War I, the two countries had been great allies, but with India now in the fascist sphere, Afghanistan officially cuts all ties and aligns with the West. In Spanish Jordan, French Palestine, and Catalan Lebanon, the military government still held out and continued as if everything was normal, pretending that their home countries hadn't collapsed. Carthage invited them to the MSI, hoping to one day restore them to rule their home nations. In Vietnam, the idea of fascism became extremely popular. On all sides, Vietnam was surrounded by enemies, and the Vietnamese people felt that they needed someone who could protect their nation, so they elected a fascist into power. Vietnamese fascism is interesting, as they do not align themselves with Carthage or the MSI. Instead, Vietnam focuses mainly on itself and building itself up to take over Asia. That includes the MSI ally of India. In January 2017, Central Philippines was invaded and fell within a week. In March 2018, Vietnam invaded Sumatra, but was met with a much harsher international response. In a rare show of unity, the Asian Commonwealth, the MSI and the BTO all condemned the invasion and sanctioned Vietnam. The notable exception was NACO, as North America saw potential for an ally in Vietnam. The front would stalemate, and in January 2020 the Treaty of Fresno ended the war, with Vietnam allowed to annex the north of Sumatra. Not even a month later, the next big war would happen. Ever since the turn of the millennia, Caspia had been on the decline. The decades of tension finally culminated in the Caspian Civil War. Almost all of Caspia's neighbors got involved in the war. North Mesopotamia annexed Azerbaijan, who was in a personal union with Caspia. In an interesting turn of events, Persia and Afghanistan worked together to support the central government, trying to restore order to the region. The Asian Commonwealth jointly supported a communist movement in Caspia. Tibet helped both the communist and royalist movements. India sent volunteers to help out corporatists in the south. And Tatarstan invaded directly to take some land. After 3 years, the country was split in two. The south being the remnants of the monarchy and the north communist. Tatarstan gained the land it wanted. Then, on October 10, 2026, Carthage sent an invasion force across the Mediterranean. They were destined to land in Spain. Murcia sent its own army across the border, helping Carthage. The Spain War had begun. Within a few weeks, most of the country was occupied. The BTO sent everything it had to Spain to help them out, and by some miracle, Spain pushed the invaders back. Yet the MSI still occupied the south. The MSI accused the BTO of attacking them without reason, yet the BTO reasoned that the MSI attacked a neutral nation. The Mondial League sided with the BTO and sanctioned Carthage. As all major blocs took a side, the Baltic Treaty Organization, the North American Cooperation Organization, the Mutual Security Initiative and the Asian Commonwealth gear up for what many now expect to be inevitable, the Third World War. The breaking point became Libya, as they feared that they were next, they joined the BTO. Carthage accused Libya of breaking the peace deal, yet Libya accused Carthage of doing the same in Spain. Then, on September 1, 2029, Carthage sent a declaration of war to Libya. Many were surprised by this, seeing how poorly the MSI performed in Spain up until this point. Nevertheless, the BTO supported their Libyan allies. NARCO took this opportunity and declared war on both blocs, attempting to weaken MSI influence in Asia and South America and to take the treaty ports from the Dutch Empire. The Asian Commonwealth declared war on both the BTO and MSI as well, for the same reasons as NARCO did. The AC and NARCO could cooperate, but it is unlikely as tensions between the two are heating over the status of a NARCO partner. Nevertheless, the world has, nearly 100 years after the previous, once again fallen into a world war. I will end this scenario here, so you can make your own law on who wins World War III. If you enjoyed this series, please subscribe to stay notified for future videos. The next parts of Long Live the Kaiser will not be continuing the law. Instead, they will be a hypothetical on what if the Spanish or Chinese won the Cold War, and then I will go a bit deeper into the lore of the series and explain why certain events happened and how realistic everything was. I can't wait to see you there. But for now, as always, this was the end of the video.